Hey everybody, how's it going? Andrew here, and I just wanted to say, if you're listening to the show, there's probably a good chance you're finding the discussions helpful. But even if the content is helpful, if you're ever uncertain of how to apply this information and take action, then having a guide that understands your needs and helps you find solutions could make all the difference for you. Look, I love helpful content and do my best to apply it in ways that help me grow my business and even myself. But I also know navigating challenges alone or even with a team can be a daunting task. Hey, I'm a strong believer in a bad decision now is better than making a perfect decision later. But you know what? I'd rather reduce that risk and take action now. This is the reason why I have my own guides to help me on my journey. So if you feel that you're struggling with anything in yours or feeling uncertain about how to tackle your challenges, let's chat. I'm always happy to learn more about my listeners, especially if there are ways that I can help you solve your problems. So if you're up for a chat, please visit rengenmarketing.com and click on the Let's Chat in the nav menu. At the very least, my goal is to get to know you a little so I can help guide you in the right direction. So thanks again for being such great listeners. Let's get right to the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about mastering your studio's growth. Now, starting an indie game studio can be difficult, but growing a sustainable one can be a challenging experience faced with a variety of unknown obstacles where every decision can impact your growth. So today, we're going to explore the indie side of business development by breaking things down into simple concepts that can make all the difference in how you establish relationships, discover opportunities, and even avoid some potential hazards along the way, keeping you on a path to mastering your studio's growth. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with us I have Nick McDonnell. Nick, how is it going? And man, thanks for being here with us today.
That's right. Thanks for accommodating my annoying time slot.
I know.
Being in Australia. Hey, where are you in the US?
I'm based in northeastern US, New Hampshire specifically.
That explains why it's so janky. Yeah.
Yeah. And so folks, Nick here, he's based in, Melbourne?
We're in Melbourne, Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. So quite a difference in time zone here. So my evening, his early morning. So we're really thankful for him to dedicate some time his morning to talk with us today about a really cool subject. But before we do, hey, for those of you who aren't familiar with Nick, he is the managing director for the game studio Samurai Punk for what? It's approaching almost 10 years, right? Like
we turned 10 in March. Yeah.
Man, that's super exciting. Like, wow. Because you've been there since the beginning and everything, and just, man, 10 years. That kicks butt. But in addition to, being the manager director, as we would assume with any of us indies, as we wear multiple hats. So he also works as a project lead doing design and gameplay prototyping, and I'm sure an array of lots of other tasks and everything else to help support the team. Of what Samurai Punk has produced in that 10 years, we're not going to go through the whole list because it's quite a bit, but I mean, everything from Killbug, Justice Sucks, Tactical Vacuum Action, Trios, Feather, Roombo, First Blood, Screen Cheat, and like I said, many others. And those are just the games you guys produce, I believe. There's also a whole bunch of others you co-developed with and had some type of partnerships, right? Yeah. So. Yeah. Quite an extensive portfolio there. And I mean, obviously 10 years speaks to that, but that's just really cool that you guys are just doing so much. And on top of it, achievements. I mean, you've spoken at like various events and conferences such as like GCAP or GCIP, PAX, Casual Connect, and most recently, I think this was like a couple of weeks ago, you were at...
just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, GCAP, and you were part of a discussion talking about indies versus big devs, and under the subtopic of, can we be friends?
Yeah, that was a really fun talk I did with actually my business mentor, who used to run Game Loft in Brisbane, and before that he was at various different wings of EA since the 90s and pandemic. He'd done a lot of work. So he sort of represented the old guard of Australian game development.
Yep.
And I was, sort of representing not only smaller independent development, but also like newer development.
Yeah, no, it sounded like a really cool conversation. And if there's any way to like check it out, I'd love to do so.
Yeah, I think anyone interested, the recordings will be up on the GCAP YouTube panel at some point. I'm just not sure when. They're pretty slow.
Well, understand, those things happen, but hey, folks, if you want to check out that topic, make sure to check out the GCAP videos once they go live. Cause like I said, I'm sure that's a good one, and interesting. On top of that though, and kind of a natural fit for why you're here, why you've been doing all those talks and stuff. I mean, in the past, you were also a sessional lecturer and instructor at, Swinburne University of Technology. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean,
I did that at the same time as running Samurai Punk during the start. So it wasn't before Samurai Punk.
Oh,
okay. It was during. Yeah. So that was during our very early days. A lot of us were teaching actually. So yeah, I was lecturing and I was also writing one of the courses or subjects, sorry, and just doing tutoring. It was sort of how we got by before Screensheet had sort of like made enough money for us to like properly work full time.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah.
Such a good, story there and everything else. Well, and I mean, all right, you're doing a lot, involved in it quite a bit. When you have some downtime, what are some hobbies? What do you do for fun, man?
Besides working on side projects, that event.
Yeah,
that's a real thing. I have an itch. I got like a bunch of games up there.
All right.
Killbug itself is basically a side project as well. Like I made that on my own, and then I brought it in about halfway through or close toward the end, and we decided to sort of finish it up as a company game. That's boring though, north here, but side projects. This makes it sound like I just work all the time. Like going out for drives into the country, like cooking a lot, doing my gardening, just normal boring house stuff, just to be a complete break, from the. I read quite a lot.
Okay.
It's like I have a small library in the office.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, my previous guest is a crazy reader. She just said like that's one of her hobbies. She reads like up to like 7 books, 7 books like a time.
Oh my God. No, I read one at a time.
Yeah.
Very slowly now.
Exactly. All right. Anyways, cool stuff, man. I won't try to go too much onto tangents there, but a lot of exciting things. Glad you make some time to kind of unwind and do some fun things too, on top of all the cool stuff you're doing with your side projects and everything else. So thank you so much for sharing that. But before we get started in the conversation, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you by having you go through our Q-Box round. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's simply a series of random questions we prepared here for Nick today. So Nick, are you ready for the Q-Box round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What advice would you give someone else who's just starting out?
I think understanding where you want to go and understanding that will change over time is really important. Like, so just knowing yourself. And it's very hard to do that if you're like a student at university or you're a solo developer, you're doing whatever means to get yourself some experience to get a job. But if you want a job in the first place, it's really hard to know like what you want to do for the rest of your life. So trying to sort of even put that down on paper and saying like, okay, at least for the next 5 years, I want to do this. And you work towards that. And then in a couple of years, you look back at that thing you wrote down and you say, oh, is that still the case? Like, that's still what I want to do. And just trying to make constant progress towards a goal, even if that goal is going to change, because it will inevitably. When I first started out, I wanted to be working in AAA. I just wanted to work. I wanted to have a job. But the reality of 2014's games industry in Australia was that there were 0 jobs available. So I had to start a studio instead.
Yeah, great story behind that. Love the point. And it's funny because I've actually heard that story happen in a lot of cases. Like there's no real industry, so some of these folks are like, "Hey, well, we're kind of like the trailblazers here. We gotta start those things." So awesome to hear that you're one of the ones that kind of like started that up. So great stuff. All right, next here is what's your main approach to tackling problems?
Should do a bunch of depending on the problem. I mean, because I have to face so many weird problems every day. Fact finding first and foremost, just getting as much information down. If I have no idea what's going on, and then I usually just do it straight away. Like I don't really second guess it too much, especially when it's a development problem, like a technical or a programming thing or an implementation thing. I'll just kind of do it and then iterate on the solution once I've got something down on paper. That applies to how I do creative direction, how I do working on games, and it's kind of how I approach to doing like any business development as well. But like I'll just try to do something straight up, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. And like as long as I haven't like done something to upset someone, which is pretty hard if you're a nice person, like it's hard to. You just move forward and just iterate a lot, like taking in small steps rather than making some massive grand decision and taking ages to do that and then executing on it and that fails and getting upset. You just little steps.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. A friend of mine, I'm trying to slowly make a game with, because right now it's all in him. He faces issues like that sometimes, and I tell him something similar. It's like, hey, don't worry about it, just do it. He's like, well, I don't want it to be worth for nothing. I'm like, it's never worth nothing. It's
if you have no facts and you have no information, once you do some work on it, once you actually put some stuff down on paper, the problem becomes smaller at that point. Yeah. And it's now framed around, is this a solution, or is this working towards a solution, or is the doing just something totally different? But at least you've at least done like some sort of process of elimination there as well, where you're like going like, this actually is definitely not what we should be doing. And that helps you get closer to what you should be doing. Yeah. Because now you have more information.
Absolutely. See, I love your take on it and position. So thank you for sharing that. And last but not least here on the show is, what game are you playing now? And I meant a staple here on the show. We're not done with the episode, folks. What game are you playing right now?
I'm not playing it because I just finished it like last night. But I was playing. Yeah, we'll count it. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I've got other stuff on the go, but I'm playing Dredge, or I just finished Dredge.
Okay.
Wonderful game from New Zealand. I really enjoyed it. A couple of little gripes, but like overall, like it did a really good job of what it was trying to do. It was really short too, which was nice. Like, it was only, I think I'm very much a completionist, and I got most of the game bits and side stuff done in like 10 hours. So I was like, it's perfect for me. Yeah. That's for a full game. I don't usually finish things. That was good.
That's good to hear, because, as ambitious as I might be in wanting to play, Dragon Quest 11, I'm not anywhere near the end of that game. So knowing something like that is good to know. So thanks for sharing that. Awesome stuff. And now that we know a little bit more about you, let's dive into our topic today, which is mastering your studio's growth. So kick off here, like marketing, business development can entail, quite a lot and may be interpreted in different ways by people, right? But at a high level, could you just perhaps break down business development into like specific categories that you think would be important to most game studios?
As in the work, or what the actual job entails?
I would say maybe a brief combination of both.
Okay. Yeah, because I would say that the main thing about the job itself and when you're doing it is it's just relationship building. Mm-hmm. I think unless you're in it for short-term gains, like you're like, I just need to get this deal and then get the fuck out of here and then, I don't know, sell my company and piss off, which is like not, sorry, I didn't realize it was this way.
That's okay. Keep going.
We've signed deals based on relationships that were started 5 or 6 years before that deal was signed, where at the time there was nothing to be gained from that relationship besides have a beer at a party, or let's go for a coffee between events. It's a lot of meeting people in between events where it's like, I just want to go and have lunch, and you run into someone on the street because they're also going to get lunch, and you sit down with them. It really takes a long time to cook off. And you can't force it. And if you are naturally not going to be friends with someone because of personality conflicts, then that's just going to be a conflict. And you need to just be aware of who you are as a person and not compromise. There's a lot of crusty old men in the games industry who maybe haven't quite got their head on straight. So I think that's the work. That's the bulk of the work. It's just relationship building and doing it truthfully and being an honest person and being a good face value business dealer is not not overselling what you're actually able to do. Like I don't describe myself as a salesman, which is why I'm pretty bad at my job, honestly, because I'm not a big like salesy person. I won't oversell anything ever, really. I don't like lying. And as far as like the active work itself, it's a lot of going to events, which is very hard for Australians because we have to fly a lot. It's very expensive, but not as bad as some countries. So, and we're quite affluent as a country, so I really shouldn't complain. Going to events, meeting people in person really does a lot. Like it was very hard over COVID, whether there was a lot of like meeting things happening, different online avenues, but it was all very shallow. Whereas like, it's not the same as like accidentally having a 2-hour conversation with someone because you just like are friends and talking about something. So we combine like boring corporate events like GDC or GCAP is the one here with like PAX has always been really good because there are always parties and there's always people walking around those events. And like if you're running a booth, like a lot of people will come to you because they're doing the floor sweep. Like a publisher will be doing a sweep of the floor. When they stop, you say hi, you get a card, you talk to them a bit, and especially if you've met them before, like it's a great chance to check in. And just doing that circuit is a great way to sort of keep those connections fresh, because otherwise you're spending a lot of time, messaging people and emailing people,
right?
Which is the second part of the work, which is doing follow-ups and trying to provide value. I mean, like this thing I've thought about more over time, but like when you're doing a follow-up with someone, and you're just trying to like check in with them, like just trying to provide value with that follow-up and not trying to be like, I'm just trying to have an email conversation with you for literally the sake of just you remembering my email so that when I email you about a pitch or something, you're going to like not forget who I was and like not answer that email. Like don't string them along forever. Like try to actually like just be meaningful with how often you communicate with someone because they get so many emails. I'm talking about like they being like platform partners and publishers and other developers as well. Just get so many emails and get bombarded. Like just respecting their time is really important.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought those two up because I know completely makes sense having those, real life in-person connections and establishing that, relationship, because just because you talk to someone doesn't mean anything will come of it. And you might not even think that anything will come out of it. And then who knows, there's any number of possible combinations that could arise from that. But then the other important thing, as you called out, not everybody can travel. It can be very difficult for a variety of reasons. So when you are making those contacts and messaging people, that I think that's super important, providing some value with those messages, because everybody does the same thing. Hey, just checking in. How you doing? And it's like, but where are you at in that value? And how is that going to be memorable if like, I don't know, 500
people. It's the person who just emails constantly and has nothing to say. Yeah, totally.
Right. But like maybe you can connect them with someone else because you're like, hey, I found out that they're looking for this and maybe I can solve this problem.
Yeah,
for them,
right? I've done a lot of intros for people because a lot of times, for a scout, especially a publisher, right, their job is just to bring in great titles.
Yep.
And if you can introduce them to someone that they otherwise didn't know about and a game that they otherwise didn't know about, like you're just making their job easier.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So that's good.
All right. I love it. And I mean, there's lots of ways we can break things down, folks, but at the core of it's really about relationships, regardless of what those relationships develop and everything. So with that said, I want to kind of go into some areas that relate a little bit more specifically to you, because I have a feeling that it relates to a lot of our listeners and just the greater community in general, which is like kind of transitioning into biz dev, right? Because everyone basically starts in the game industry for the most part with a particular skill set that, usually isn't business development related. And we're talking about indie dev, solo dev, whatever. And then things grow and so forth, right? So with that in mind, when did you and your team start seeing the need for a more, let's say, business-oriented role? And what was that transition process like for you, while also balancing all those other responsibilities you're doing with programming and design and all of that stuff?
Yeah. So I started, just like you said, like not in doing any business roles at all. I was the artist on the team. So this is my journey is pretty weird because I was art directing our games and doing all the art and animation and gameplay, level design stuff, or whatever was needed. Like, so on Screen Sheet, I did, everything visual that wasn't user interface. I did that. including VFX and animation. But at the same time, I was the one also managing our relationships with platform partners and getting our kits, and then because our publisher didn't do it for us. It's very funny. I think basically that was the point when we realized our publisher wasn't really capable of bless their souls, like they've figured out how to do their jobs these days. Amazing. They weren't able to get us onto consoles, and for Screen Sheet, that was a big deal for us. Like we that's one of the reasons we signed with the publisher was we wanted to get on consoles. We wanted to make a console game. That was the cool thing we wanted to do. We're talking like Xbox and PS4 at the time, and the Wii U just before the Switch. But that was like a dream for us as a team. So yeah, I was doing art, and it was just it just kind of came naturally while we were at events and shows that like people came up to talk to us. One of the other team members was a bit shy, and I was just comfortable talking to people and keeping those conversations going and ducking out for lunches and things. And then maintaining that over the years has just sort of I definitely just fell into it. As for transitioning, like I've never formally transitioned into a business development role. Like at the studio, I am a part-time business developer at most. And I definitely see a future in which I don't do it at all if I can find someone to take that over for me. But for now, that's the role I do. So it's balanced based on how deep into a production we are. Like, so if we're just starting out a new game, there's really not much to do. Like I said, like adding value. I've had a situation where I would go to a GDC and be like, "Oh, guys, we're gonna pitch to you this game. Just wait 6 months. It's gonna be sweet." And hype them up about it. And then we don't actually ship the game. Because most people know this, like most games get canceled, they don't get finished.
Right. Yep.
So they'd be like, "Oh, what happened to the game?" I'd be like, "Oh, we canceled it." And they'd be like, "Yeah, of course you canceled it." And I'd be like, "Yeah, but here's this other thing that we actually are working on now. This is going to ship." So like over time, I've decided to like do less of that because it's just wasting their time and confusing them, bringing them things that are never going to actually see the light of day. So yeah, I tend to start reaching out to people like once the project is real, like it's like we've committed the resources to it, the game exists. So during we're in that phase right now where we're not really doing any outreach. I was at G-Camp recently, obviously, and that was a conference. So I was testing my game. So I did like a little pitch trailer basically, and I was testing it, but I was testing on other devs really, and I was just getting a sense of like what's the vibe of people resonating with this thing. So I guess that could be considered part of the work. But I also consider that part of my role as like project lead. It's just like my responsibility to check in on the vibe of the game and make sure it's good. See if it's going to resonate creatively as well as commercially. Like are people like, this is cool, but it's never going to make any money. And I feel like we have a reasonably good sense of that anyway.
Yeah.
Like when we release a game, we kind of know how well it's going to do.
Yeah.
We're not stupid enough to think we're going to be making bank on everything we do.
Yeah, I mean,
that's one way to go. Yeah, so like over time, the role has changed a bit, but like I kind of did it straight away. It was very much like we started work on Screen Sheet in January of 2014, and by August we were at our first event, and I had already started doing stuff there. So it just went from there.
Yeah, no. So it's really just a kind of a organic progression, and it's like, hey, who can best do this? In a way, I think it sounded like it just inadvertently was, hey, who can play to their strengths here?
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely that. It was so like I also do our legal for the team, whereas my co-founder does more the accounting because like he's more detail oriented and I'm much more high level oriented. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, again, I mean, we've talked about this topic before, folks, where, playing to your strengths can be a huge advantage. And here, Nick just outlined like really quickly, like how his team kind of came together and just kind of fell in place where they needed to based off of those strengths. It can be very advantageous and everything, I want to talk about something real quick, as you mentioned. You were saying everything from like, as you're moving forward and having sense of your projects and like the commercial viability and understanding that. I'm just curious too, like as you guys as a whole and even your, role when it was it really, focused more on the biz dev side of things or even less. I mean, you obviously in time became familiar with your studio's growing needs in terms of what's needed for this project, et cetera. Now, were there any particular, let's say, market trends or even other factors that kind of influenced your studio's decisions, whether it was with the project or anything else?
There is definitely one big one, which is that this is like showing how innocent we were when we started, but like after a screen sheet, we were figuring out what game 2 would be, or game 3, actually. No one knows about our first game. Well, people do actually. Some people know about our first game. It was a mobile game that did not do very well. But we made screen sheets shortly after that, and then people know us for that. So we were trying to figure out what game 3 would be. And, at the time, VR was this like hot thing that everyone was into. And we were like excited about it. And we were excited about it creatively. We didn't think there was going to be any money in it, really. Maybe we thought there was. But yeah, we were able to get free dev kits. And so we started working on a VR game, basically. Like that was the direct through line. It was like, I had a friend at Sony who could get us a PSVR, and then which was the first one we got access to.
Yep.
And then we were like, okay, we have this idea for a different game called I Have No Mouth and I Must Shoot, which eventually became the American Dream. So that is very much us just being like, not even trends, because the hardware hadn't released at this point. It was like the hype for VR was real back in 2017 and 16. Maybe it was 15 and 16. I'm actually not sure when we started that project. And yeah, we made that game with no experience in the hardware. We made a massive game that wasn't even an amazing fit for the hardware, but it ended up becoming like a bit of a cult classic. So that's been a sort of a weird thing where we were just very much following our hearts on that and just like doing something weird and strange on weird and strange hardware, because that's what we thought we were going to do. So we did it.
So I'm going to divert for a minute here, but like, I guess what was your big takeaway from that experience? Like doing something a little different, kind of using
don't expect
trends?
When you make a game about political satire of gun culture in the US to not have the game get taken off stores because there's a mass shooting in the US. That's the first major takeaway. No, I mean, that was a really interesting learning in BizDev, because there was a lot of me being like, hi, you know how you said you were going to give us a sale opportunity? Because there were a lot of things where we were lined up for promotions. And I don't think the platform holders really understood what they were dealing with at the time, because we had a lot of like, we had pre-orders lined up on all the platforms because we were sim shipping it on Quest. Well, at the time it was the Rift, PlayStation and Steam. We had pre-orders lined up, and we had a pre-sale lined up, and we had like a promotion lined up, and all of that got canceled because there was a mass shooting in the US. And it's like, did they sell us on this not knowing that there was going to be a mass shooting? Because in the US there's a mass shooting like every day.
It's sad, but
I'm sorry. It's really sad. The reason we made this game, like it's very tragic. But yeah, those platform holders like not fully understand what they were dealing with, because I think what happened was they would push it through to their seniors, and then their seniors would go like, we can't promote this. This is not good for the platform. So it had to just get released quietly, basically. So that was one big lesson. It's just like learning like where, like learning you'll just like get sold on a thing that might not actually happen. Like even if someone says, we're going to make this thing happen, like they can still change their minds like the day before launch.
Yep.
That was how it was when it was. There was nothing we could do.
Yep.
They were like, yep, it came down from the Zuck himself. In the case of Meta, he was like, no, there are too many shootings. And sorry, I think I totally missed the question.
No, it's all right. There's just takeaways from that experience. And
and then this is another one. This is more about studio direction, but we didn't lose any skills going from PC flat screen to doing VR, but we definitely lost audience across those games. So even though they're both games with guns, or they're not really, American Dream is an adventure game, really. Like it's a narrative adventure more than it's a shooter. But yeah, there's no audience crossover for a start. So there was no way we could capitalize on our, Jason De La Rocca talks about this all the time, of having like a consistent like audience that you bring from game to game to game and build up your super fans. Like we weren't able to do that between Screen Sheet and American Dream. And then we also did not build on skills that we would then be able to put into game 4. So going from we did have some people. It's American Dream was funny because it actually led to a lot of contract work. Like you mentioned at the start, we've done a bunch of projects for other people in co-devs. So American Dream primarily led to a bunch of service work, which kept us going and helped pay the bills. Mm-hmm. But then it meant that we didn't then have all this new skill in core game development that then we were then able to reapply for the next game.
Yeah.
So it had this weird effect here where like we built up all these new skills, which were now actually very marketable in the serious games and the like, I guess just like the games industry as a whole, not in the consumer market. But our games didn't then improve as a result of all this work we put into this one game. What came after? Yeah, Feather was not drastically better because of American Dream.
And then basically you just iterated on that progression in terms of what you were learning from the projects and how to maintain those audiences through your future work. And it sounds like all these other things started like kind of like building off of that. And hey, kind of what we were saying in the beginning, if it wasn't for that VR game, do you think you potentially could have been in a different position than compared to where you are now? I mean, perhaps, but I'm just saying it's really interesting how you look, as you reflect, it kind of brought some things to light, made it more apparent. So you maybe can focus a little bit more on the path ahead. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we would have come to that realization as quickly. I mean, not that it was quick. It took 2.5 years, but because that was our second longest production. Mm-hmm. So no, I don't know if we would have still come to the decision. Like, this is the thing, when you start a company right out of university, you're just not at the maturity level to think about these things. If some people are, because they have the resources available, they have great mentors, so they work at other studios first. But yeah, we were not like cognizant enough of our actions as studio leads, even though we were very small at the time. We still are small, but we weren't really thinking about the direction of all these things as much. So would it have made a difference? I think yes, but if we had, would we have been able to really capitalize on, oh, okay, we did another flat screen game instead and we carried across? I don't know if it would have happened.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story though, and glad you shared that with us. You know, I'm also curious too, because want to move on in a different area, and might, you know, kind of go back to some of what we discussed already, but like kind of like what we can consider as like, say, effective, you know, business development strategies. Because, you know, as we discussed before, very briefly, you know, there's just a lot of different areas we can talk about in terms of like what business development is, what it like, we can drill down as much as we want. But the important thing is like, you know, these connections are important. But with that said, you know, there's obviously a lot of different areas, you know, within studios that you kind of need to focus on, you know, with your business. Like there's probably 100 things, right? There's always something. Yeah. But obviously some efforts generate more results than others, and results can be defined, obviously, you know, what's your core objective, what's your goals, et cetera, right? But knowing this and everything there, it feels like everything's important, right? But what would you say are the most impactful or even pivotal biz dev strategies that you or your studio employs, and how do you assess like new opportunities that have potential?
Oh, okay. Strategies. I mean, I don't really know if I think about it that deeply to the point where I have like a process. Besides that thing I talked about, but just realizing that I should stop annoying people and I should just like deliver on promises. Like, I mean, yeah, I guess that's the second part, is like getting better at just knowing when you present something, it's going to actually execute. Because, like I said, I don't like lying to people, and I also don't like breaking trust. Yeah. I don't want to waste people's time. And I'm not a salesperson, so I'd rather just come to them and be like, here's the thing. I like it. I love it. In fact, do you love it? And if not, that's fine. Like it's okay. But yeah, I don't have any sort of formal practices or processes that I could say are real strategies, that we use. Like, it's very informal. What was the other question?
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll just comment on that too. I mean, in a way, just keeping that, everything you just said, simple is a process in itself, you know? And I think it shines light on the point that you don't need big strategy or get extremely tactical or overthink
I
these
think your
things.
studio needs a strategy to wind back. I think what your biz dev strategy, like you can't, I mean, that's another thing I have learned, and maybe that comes back to that thing about American Dream, but like if the studio, it's funny that like, if you don't have strong vision for the business itself, that will be very clear to people who you talk to, especially to the people who are a little bit more senior on that side. Whereas they're gonna be like, oh, this is a cool game, but like, what are you guys gonna do after this? Or like, because a lot of times when you sign like a publishing deal, sometimes you're signing on the basis that, yeah, this game's fine, it's gonna break even or whatever, but we actually want to talk to you about the next thing. Like, we just want to establish that we want to sign this deal to establish a relationship and a working relationship with you now, so that we can work with you on the next title. And it can be very hard for people to do that if you're a bit like up in the air about like what's next, or you don't. You say, oh, well, not only do we not know what game's next, which is common. Not everyone's good at laying both tracks ahead of time, but you don't even know what sort of direction the next thing will be coming in.
Yeah.
And that's something we've been trying to hone in on over time, because it does make it a lot easier to have conversations. So yeah, I guess like a strategy is that you do need to have like some kind of a vision for the future of your business, or you got to be straight up with these people and say, like, especially like, there's nothing wrong with starting a company to make a single game and then being like, that's it, we'll part ways, right?
Yep.
But we didn't do that. Obviously, we've done like 9 games in 9 years. We've made lots of games. So like, if you don't have a cohesive vision for the business, this it will come through in your dealing with non-internal people. With external people, they will know that like you're just kind of like firing from the hip with each title, you know?
Yeah. No, I like that you called out to that too, because I'm pretty positive that happens more frequently than we like to admit or are aware of. And it's really the reality of it. And you just outlined 2 perfect ways to deal with it. One, make sure you have that vision, because, you know, we earlier we talked about, hey, great way to move forward is networking, get these connections going, right? But then you got to think on the other side, like who is it that you're talking to? Who is it that you're forming these relationships with? And we think, oh, getting a publisher would be great for whatever the reason. But then if you're not putting yourselves in their shoes, what is their reason for it? And you just gave a perfect example of what they're looking for. And we hear about this stuff, but we don't necessarily think about it all the time. And then the flip side of that is, I just want to make this one title. Then just be upfront with it. And there's going to be people that are completely fine with that. And again, it goes back to your whole concept of like, hey, I don't want to waste your time and everything else. So if I'm trying to like pitch you this project and then you're looking at like long term and I'm short term, well, something's not going to align. And now whose time you're wasting? You're wasting each other's time. Yeah.
This is why it does help to really get to know these people and understand the values of the business you're dealing with, because that can really shortcut a lot of awkward conversations. It's been like, oh, actually, we just want totally different things like out of this. Like, you know, you'll deal with people who are exclusively in it for cash, right? And they could be great people and great to work with, but you just got to know that that's what they want. And that might not align with your values. Like we're not interested in, we're not a profit first business. If we were, we probably would have made profit. But like that'll butt a lot of heads when you meet someone who's like, oh yeah, so tell me how this game is going to make me 10x my money. Yeah. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Most games don't even make 1/10 of their budget back. Like, we need to be talking about how we're going to make our money back, not how we're going to be making 10x back. And then very quickly you're like, oh, okay, I can have a relationship with this person, but I can't have a relationship with this business because they're just operating at a different level of interest. Like they don't see value in a long-term like creative output, or seeing this as like one step on the road to something bigger. So I guess matching, understanding people's values, and it can be hard to get that, which is why people always say you just got to like talk to people more and spend more time getting to know them as people and the companies they work for. Yeah, no, and that was such a good gold nugget you just dropped there, right? Like just really having that understanding. And in line with that and everything else we were just talking about, I'm kind of curious too, because clearly, you know, partnerships and collaborations can definitely be instrumental to any studio's growth. So
with that in mind, and from your own experience, like, how would you say, like, what's your is there a process, or how do you go about choosing like the right partners? Is it having those understandings, and what do you look for in a successful collaboration? Because I think these are things that are unfortunately underrated, but super important. So what do you look for those partnerships, for those collaborations?
Yeah. So I think with our commercial work, when it's like us making a game that's going to go to Steam and consoles and stuff, it's a lot easier because a lot of the partners, honestly, I like what most of the consoles are doing and I have no issue with them. It's just about finding a champion at those platforms that's going to actually help you move forward. And it's very rare that they'll actually offer you like a crazy thing that's going to waste your time. Like like when I talked about that thing with VR, right? They didn't say, oh, here's $500,000 and a headset. Can you make us something? It's a blank check. And that was like a way for us to waste our time. It was like, we were the ones who made that mistake. They didn't give us a bad offer for something. Usually I have to come to them with something and then they will take it forward and amplify it. It's very rare that they'll sell you on some pipe dream. So that's very easy. I think for those, it's like they're aligned because they're making stuff and they're releasing stuff that's commercial, but usually has some level of like artistic intent and interest, and they'll promote the good games that are also. And again, I'm just talking about consoles here. They'll promote the good games that are also like going to make their money back. So they're obviously they're still hedging their bets on the business side of things.
Yep.
They're not going to just be like this beautiful like artistic work that we know is never going to make its money back. We'll promote the shit out of that. They still go like, oh yeah, we see the dollars here, but they're not as single-minded as being like, oh, this is only dollar first, right? They support independent titles and they support stuff that's like more creative.
Yep.
So that's good. On the I guess I'm trying to separate out like our contract work from our IP work. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to contracts, we've had a lot more interesting dealings with different clients. So for example, we did a project with Tin Man Games. We did a co-development with them where we built the technical side of their project, Table of Tales. And we did that for about 2.5 years. And whilst I think there were no misalignments on value, like I love that team. I love everyone there. And we all have great friends, past and present employees of the of Tin Man. Whether I don't know if that project was right for us, like as the opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. It brought in some revenue, but we lost people, and it was like doubling down on. It was a VR project, so it was more of this like doubling down on skills that were useless to us when they were reapplied to flat screen games, which is what our bread and butter IP work was.
Yep.
So we were making a short-term cash opportunity, and we're losing out on this skills development. So we had tried to focus more on things like porting or, I guess porting was one of the only projects that we did. We ported Florence for Annapurna, where that felt like it was at least we developed in our internal tools, which we used to ship our own games. So that was all very beneficial. And that worked out really well. So the opportunity costs, I think for us as a company that does IP work and service work, mostly IP work now, is we were always looking like a great project for us would be one that, yes, it pays the bills and it helps keep the company ticking along nicely. And that's the whole point of doing service work. But it also builds some core value or skill that we can then rebuild or reuse, or technology that we can reapply to our IP work. So the problem was we did a lot of service work that didn't do that. And it didn't waste our time in terms of cash, but it definitely wasted our time creatively. And it created a lot of burnout for the team.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that you called that out too, because it's one of those things that we don't necessarily think about face value. Hey, we see this opportunity. It means we're getting some money. But then, what are those opportunity costs? What does it really mean in the long road? And how does that align with your overall vision and everything else? And is it going to help you get there? And one way or shape or form, it will, but it could be a longer path. And it's really hard to kind of...
For us, I feel like it was a lot of longer path stuff where it was focused on...
Alexa, stop!
because it was focused on survival rather than growth or like going towards that central vision, it didn't hurt us in terms of didn't pull us backwards, but it definitely didn't move us forwards.
Yeah. No, and I love that you share that because, again, I think it's just one of those things we don't think about, or it's more of the in moment, and it can really do a number without even realizing until, like they say, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we definitely discussed a lot here today, and I mean, can't thank you enough. There's so much value here, but of what we have discussed, and maybe I would love for you to maybe like summarize in either a couple of tips or suggestions or advice for listeners today based on what we discussed.
Oh, shoot. That's hard to summarize.
Or just tips and advice, anything that, fit into scope.
No, having a strong understanding of who you are and what you want to achieve, and compromising on that when it suits you, not when it suits other people, is really important. Like, you have to compromise in business. That's just something you have to do all the time. Compromises are required, like creatively, commercially. We had to take this shitty office that I'm in currently because we got kicked. Our old place got shut down, and we had a short time. We needed a new office because we were porting our games. We needed an in-person space, right? But the upside was that it was cheap rent. So, and then recent downsides, we got robbed, right? But these are compromises you make in business all the time, because you make either short or long-sighted decisions. So, yeah, if you do understand what your values are, though, and if you can make at least good decisions around that, where you're like, and you understand, okay, I'm doing this, I'm going to get this out of it long term or short term, and this part of it is a compromise, and I just have to live with that. Or sometimes there's no compromise, and that's great. Because if you don't understand what your values are as a company, as an individual, you'll just start compromising on shit without even knowing it. And then realize later, oh, I shouldn't have done any of that stuff because I didn't actually like it. What I thought was an upside is actually a downside. Yeah. And I think that applies to individual creatives as well as like studio leads, and in business development, it's like the kind of people you deal with, Yeah.
Awesome. Some really good sound advice there. Well said. And man, I really can't thank you enough, Nick, for being here with us today. But before we part, I would love for you to share what are some links? How can people find out more about Samurai Punk? Can they connect with you? What's some info where people can get in touch or learn more?
Yeah. We're easy to Google. If you just look up Samurai Punk, you'll find all our website, all our social channels. These days, I think the main social channel for us is probably TikTok or YouTube. Okay. Because Twitter or X or whatever is a bit trash. It sounds like he's going to start charging for it for everyone now. I don't know. We have all the others. We have like a Mastodon and this company. No, it really matters. That's just to follow the company. We have a mailing list, which I think is pretty cool. You can sign up for that. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on all of these places and I will respond eventually. It depends. I'm trying to use less social media. But it's annoying because that's kind of required for the job as well. Yep. But now that Twitter is bad, no one knows where to go. So game dev, it's like, where does game dev Twitter go when Twitter is dead? But yeah, you can just email me, honestly. It's just my name at samuraipunk.com.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
So folks, check out Nick, check out Samurai Punk on YouTube, TikTok, easy to Google, easy to remember. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. They got a cool newsletter. They got some cool games. Check them out. And yeah, Nick, can't thank you enough for sharing your insight today. Lots of awesome value there, and can't thank you enough.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was great.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.